Konika, I'm very excited for our conversation today. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So it's funny because when we were first introduced, we met at an event hosted by the lovely Dr. Lisa Brent, who's been on the show. Go listen to our episode if you haven't heard it yet. But I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I know so many women about my age with tween daughters. My daughter's younger, she's 5. And I thought, oh, this conversation is going to be perfect for them. And then after our initial conversation, I realized, oh, wait a minute. Like we might want to be having some of these conversations with our daughters at a much younger age than I realized. So why don't we just start there? At what age do you recommend that parents start talking to their daughters about their body awareness, body changes, and then puberty and menstruation from there?
The earlier we start, the easier it is. They're brimming with joyful curiosity. And our bodies are something that from even before we were born change constantly. And we have that curiosity, and it encourages so much more embodiment if we're casual and really open to these conversations. So the earlier, the better. Start early.
So my daughter's 5. What would I say to my 5-year-old daughter? And what would the purpose be? In my mind, I'm thinking just body awareness, body sovereignty. But what do you think?
Well, first of all, they're so filled with curiosity that when they ask questions, I have a 3-step thing that I do if they ask tricky questions, which is just start with a deep breath and then ask, oh, that's such a great question. And that actually buys you time for your second deep breath. And then say, what do you think the answer to that question is? And their attention spans are short, so we keep them, really short. But if we look for teachable moments around too, you see a mom breastfeeding and you can say, what do you think they're doing? And we're just normalizing and getting comfortable with, our bodies. Body literacy, actually, I'm a body literacy specialist, and it's the study of listening to our bodies. I always like to say that our body is like a compass and we just need to learn how to read it. And so that's the literacy piece. And it can be as simple as, are you thirsty? Are you hungry? Are you full? Are you sleepy? And these sound like such basic things, but even as adults, we aren't always role modeling stopping when we're thirsty, sleepy, listening to those cues. And so from a very early age, we can start building those body literacy skills.
I'm going to throw my husband under the bus for a second. Sorry, Sammy, but he will get hangry still. And I'm like, dude, didn't you know you were hungry? But he doesn't because he gets so focused on a task, either it's work or some project he's working on, that he just totally tunes out his body's messages.
And that's a great example of a teachable moment, talking about that very openly. And our kids see us having those conversations.
And I love that you're talking about those very basic physical sensations that keep us alive, because if we start there, then we can start to tune in and get a little more detailed with the emotions that we're feeling and where we're feeling them. And I'm going to raise my hand and say I'm still learning a lot of this now, even though I'm very physically aware as a fitness teacher for 18 years and growing up dancing. I'm very aware of my body and space. I have good proprioception, but I don't have good internalizing. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, I'm not great at knowing when I'm angry, where do I feel that in my body and what does it feel like? And I'm in a program right now where they're encouraging us to describe that. And I'm like, I don't know. So out of touch. How did this happen?
Same. And yet, though, when we're starting these conversations earlier, it is a native skill.
So let's talk about when the girls get a little older than mine. When do you start talking to them about puberty and menstruation?
So the onset of puberty in girls, modern puberty, actually for all genders is earlier. And so for girls, we're talking as young as age 6 or 7.
For breast buds to show up?
Well, breast buds age 7. But the pituitary gland is starting to send the hormones prior to seeing that really obvious physical sign, the breast bud. So it could be age 6.
My gosh.
Right? And then the timeline has stretched. And so we're talking an earlier onset and it lasting like a decade, similar to all the perimenopause that we talk about. And so my lessons can start as young as 2nd grade. With girls about puberty, because we're trying to get ahead. So, if we know that breast buds are developing at age 7 in some girls, But even if your daughter is not, and I avoid saying late bloomers and early bloomers because there's some judgment around being late or early, but just whether your daughter starts puberty young or later, they're talking to each other and they're hearing things, and they're so open too, like in my workshops, they'll touch their chest and say, oh, I have a breast bud or I don't, and they're just so, because they're younger, it's a whole different thing. One of my second graders actually once approached me and asked if she had breast cancer. And it was a eye-opening moment where I stopped everything and talked to my pediatrician mom friend, and she said, yes, we just need to start these conversations earlier because we don't want anyone thinking they have breast cancer when they're in second grade.
And that's just a sign that they're sponges and they hear things. They don't necessarily know what it means, but they don't know that it doesn't apply to them. And oh my gosh. Okay. So when you're talking to 7-year-olds about puberty and menstruation, tell me how that conversation goes.
I still remember the first time that I brought it down to that level and how excited they got. So I like to enter the conversation with more of a social, emotional, and a brain science piece because, talking about changes in our body, it's very personal and private. And so we want to enter in a place that just makes them feel confident and comfortable. And so I always start with the brain science and the social emotional piece, because that's also most relevant to kids, the social emotional, Well,
tell me how you're talking to a 7-year-old about brain science.
Well, I love to have them hold up their fist and say that it's like a model of their brain, and that their brain is beginning this massive transformation or a brain remodel. And during this time, the 4 fingers over our thumb represent our prefrontal cortex, and our thumb represents our amygdala, and that's where all of our feelings come from. And that sometimes during this time, we flip our lid, and the prefrontal cortex, that's the thinking part of our brain, it doesn't talk to the feeling part of our brain. And so we just experience really big feelings. And I see this at recess when girls are coming in with, friendship challenges or drama, and we're just normalizing. And then, talking about tools. What are some ways when we flipped our lid that we can bring our lid back down? And they have great ideas of what calms their bodies, whether it's taking deep breaths or taking a walk or reading a book, getting a cozy cup of hot chocolate. But that is the starting point. And then the next piece is breast buds. And what I told them was they were a superpower, that, we are mammals and all mammals have mammary glands. But people that are assigned female at birth have this superpower that their mammary glands can produce milk, for their babies. And that it's not just any milk, that it has superpowers as well. And they got so excited. I looked back at the co-teacher in the room and they were like, yes, we have this superpower.
Oh my gosh, that's so great to shape it that way. That is not at all how it was taught to me. By the way, does sex ed still exist in public schools? Is it still a thing?
It is, and it varies from school to school. So a lot of San Francisco public schools are bringing in experts, which also is an interesting thing because all the teachers could teach this stuff, and we want to normalize that it's just another science or social emotional learning topic. It's not something different. It's just our bodies. But usually it's in 5th grade, which is clearly way too late. That's for girls.
When it was for me. And it was definitely too late for some of my friends. I remember that.
And they're talking about this stuff at recess. No, I overhear even my kindergarten students talking about periods the other day at lunch. Did you know that you bleed out of your vagina? We want to be part of that narrative early on, as early as possible. My daughter's 14 now, and I just see what a precious window it is when they're so open to talking to us, and we want to be that go-to person. My daughter, I am the go-to person for her still, but the foundation of that trust, came early.
Yeah, I mean, that kindergartner saying that sounds like her mom's telling her the truth, right? I mean, that sounds like something I would tell my daughter, because I try to just be very factual about what's happening, and they still come into the bathroom with you. So sometimes they see things and they have questions, and I'm not going to lie. I'd rather tell her the truth, but I also am not totally clear. What does she fully understand? And I don't want to scare her, because she's also still at the age where if she sees blood, she gets scared. So how can I frame this in a way that feels more either neutral or empowering to her?
So One thing I did in my kids' book, which is a first book about periods for ages 4 and up, was I had 4 clues that lead us to realizing that this nest, quote unquote, this nest in our uterus, leading to guessing what it's made out of. And then whenever I do book readings, I talk to the kids about how it's a really natural response to feel a little bit scared when we talk about blood. And that's a human response. Like we think about Halloween costumes that are scary and we put blood on it. But the 4 clues in the book are reminding us about being grateful for the ways that blood keeps us healthy. So one of the clues is to take a deep breath, and that blood sends oxygen to our whole body. So to appreciate that, and that it fights germs like a brave ninja warrior, and that it sends vitamins and minerals throughout our whole body. And so I talk about an attitude of gratitude all of the time, but we're just reminding ourselves that we are healthy because we have blood. Oh, the last clue is that it sends kindness and love through our heart. And so I can have them just feel their heart.
Yeah. Okay. That's all good advice. It seems so simple when you say it, but I don't necessarily think of that in the moment. Okay. So we talked about breast buds possibly appearing as early as 7 and starting to have the conversation about your brain and your emotions and some of those early body changes. When do you start talking about menstruation? Is that with the 7-year-olds or is that a little bit later?
I like to answer questions when kids ask, and they ask, like you said, they see you in the bathroom and they ask. Another empowering frame that I forgot to mention when I was telling you about the 4 clues is the new studies about stem cells. Kids love hearing about the power of stem cells and how they might cure diseases that we don't have cures for, and then framing it as, of course, it would make sense that if the lining of our uterus has the superpower to create a human being, that stem cells would be really powerful. And lately, I've been sharing that at workshops, and the kids, like, that's their take home thing. I know actually personally for me, when I learned about the stem cell thing, when I'm looking at my own pad, I don't get grossed out by it. I'm thinking, wow, this is cool. Not to mention I'm perimenopausal, so it's coming to an end, so I'm appreciating it. Oh, I wish I knew the superpowers of stem cells so much earlier.
Yeah, I know. So it's funny because that means the 7-year-olds and I would walk away with the same takeaway, which is, wow, stem cells are so cool.
Exactly.
My body makes them. Go body.
Yes.
Okay. And so like the details of menstruation, I remember in my sex ed class in 5th grade, I don't even remember talking about breast buds. I remember talking about periods, and they had a calendar and they showed you how to mark the calendar for your period. And I also remember that the boys and girls were separated and they did not learn about what was going on with us, and we did not learn about what was going on with them. So couple questions there. One is, what exactly are you teaching about menstruation? And then also, when do we bring the boys in? When is the right time to tell them what's going on with the girls? Because wouldn't it behoove us if we all understood what was going on with all of us?
Yes. And so the timing for all genders is when they start asking, or the earlier you have these conversations, the easier it is. And then the narrative, we're keeping it really short and simple. In my kids' book, it's for ages 4 and up. And it was an experiment to put out in the world, but it's been received so well. You know what was interesting to me when I was looking at the reviews on Amazon? That there are a lot of dads that wanted to enter this conversation, but just didn't know how or feel comfortable. And so it is accessing all genders because it's such a simple narrative. And I intentionally didn't really get into the management conversation, like all the tools you can use. I wanted it to just be a starter conversation, and then we allow kids to ask more. We don't want to go on and on. They tune us out anyway. So, and we know the younger they are, that their attention spans are shorter. Having them come to us for, asking more and more of their questions, and keeping all of our answers short when they ask us a question, because they will ask follow-up, and their follow-up questions allow us to check for understanding too.
Mm-hmm. So it does sound like your advice is don't rely on the school to be teaching them this stuff. Start having these conversations or answer their questions honestly when they come up, and keep them concise.
Definitely. And the not relying on school, they need to hear this messaging from multiple sources so that they feel comfortable and supported. And schools can be a really supportive environment. And then homes are too. There's, I don't know, a 50-50 chance that they'll be at home when they start their period, or they'll be at school or summer camp. And so we want these conversations really ideally in an ideal world to be coming from all of these different places so they feel supported.
Makes sense. Do you think there's any common mistakes that parents make, maybe with language choice or timing or going on or anything else you can think of that you can give us as guidance?
Sometimes there are girls that don't want to come to my workshops, and the moms are like, I messed this up. I told her it hurts so bad, and whatever. I don't know what the exact messaging was, but I do frequently get calls where parents are like, I feel like I messed this up. Now, that being said, as parents and as human beings, we mess things up all the time. And that's the best teachable moment. It's just, I feel like I kind of messed this up. Can we do a redo here? I got this really awesome book, or these books from the library. Let's check them out. And so that's just being human. So that being said, honesty all the way through. And one phrase that I try to avoid is becoming a woman. People say, you're becoming a woman, because now that modern puberty is starting so much earlier, it's just not relevant. It's kind of an old school saying. So I would avoid that. And then, parents, when we lead a mother-daughter workshop, they're like waiting for when I'm going to get into cramps. And the thing is that actually, or PMS, less is more in my philosophy. And, you do you, right? As a parent, whatever feels comfortable. If I'm experiencing PMS symptoms, I'm not going to hide it from my daughter. But in my workshops, they are intro level usually. We're talking 7 or 8 year olds. And first periods are often anovulatory. And it's actually very rare to experience cramps when girls have their first period. And so I tell them that the uterus is the strongest muscle in the body. And if they ask about cramps, I'm absolutely open to talking about it. But so many period conversations include PMS and cramps, and it's enough to learn about the basics. So starting small and baby steps. So I leave out cramps and PMS in these first conversations.
Yeah. And you start with the positive framing so that when it's time to bring that in, it's a piece of it, but they already hopefully have the positive umbrella wrapped around the whole topic. What about parents who had a hard time with puberty themselves, or women who have always had tough periods and they don't want to frame menstruation negatively for their daughter? Do you have any specific advice for them?
Well, first of all, getting back to starting early, it's just so much easier. It's never too late. But when we start earlier, we have these little baby conversations and we realize that it's so healing for ourselves. So it's so common that parents are like, I learned about this in secret. We didn't talk about it. And this was the extreme in my own family. I even hesitated to tell my parents that I wrote a book about periods. But then I had them read it to me because it's never too late. So
how did that go?
Great. My dad read it to me.
Oh my God. That's because so sweet.
Why not? And so I think that the big sell is immediate satisfaction of feeling the healing, and that we are breaking generational cycles of shame. And that's a powerful thing. And we all have inner activists that feel these micro activism steps.
I love that. And then I feel like a lot of us are on the other side of menstruation trying to break down the shame right now. And one question I had for you was, when is the right time to tell our daughters about perimenopause? Because I'll tell you when the wrong time is, after it has started. So that's over. I'm done with that. But I thought about okay, how interesting if we tell them right from the beginning, this is something that will happen in your life for a few decades, and then there's a sunset to it, and then you live for several more decades. Like, is that appropriate to say to a 7-year-old, or is that too much information?
That was beautiful. It's just a continuum. And we have these transitions in our life, puberty, and then for some of us, pregnancy is another transition of hormonal fluctuation and body change. And then perimenopause. And all along the way in between, our bodies are constantly changing. And we just land ourselves or ground ourselves in an attitude of gratitude that we're healthy. And so it's very, very frequent in my workshops that girls are like, and when does this end? Like, that just comes naturally. Or just the way that you just said it, it's a continuum, because they're asking about, like, the when piece is very important to them. And so giving them signs and clues of when their first period might start naturally lands with when it might end. It's just like one sentence, really. And then the other powerful piece is that in my workshops, I love to tell them that I'm experiencing many similar signs, and then we can empathize. I feel like I'm connecting more and more with my puberty workshops with my students because I'm going through similar experiences.
Well, and how similar are those? Looking at your brain, are we lifting up our prefrontal cortex and exposing our amygdala too?
Yes.
How similar are these changes?
Okay, I made a list because we know there's like hundreds of signs, right? On both ends.
Yeah.
And in the middle, if we want to include pregnancy as a middle body change time. Okay, here's my list. So you had already mentioned brain remodeling. We've talked about that with the fists. Of course, hormonal fluctuations. They both can last about a decade. And then weight gain, and especially belly fat. I like to normalize that in my puberty workshops as well. So that belly fat then redistributes itself during puberty to breast tissue and hips. And so a lot of these little girls as young as second grade are saying, I feel fat or I hate my body. Aww. And they're looking in the mirror and they're seeing their little bellies and just normalizing that, of course, also the weight gain piece, because they're having these conversations in the dining room all the time at school. I hear it about, I'm on a diet, really young. Yeah. So I like to proactively really just mention that, of course, weight gain is a healthy sign of growth. You know, you're growing taller, you're getting bigger. That makes sense, right? And they say, yes, that makes sense. Mood swings, of course, growing pains, which for us, I don't know if we call them growing pains anymore, but we definitely feel some aches and pains. And then actually both ages struggle with falling asleep and staying asleep for biological reasons, not bad habits. And then body odor can change and shift during both. Our skin dramatically shifts. So there are a lot. And I'm just starting to teach these perimenopause workshops and realizing, wait a second, I'm kind of an expert here because I've done puberty all along.
Right. So you're actually telling the girls in your workshops that you're experiencing some of these symptoms. So I like that, because not only, I don't even want to just tell them that there's a sunset to the menstruation period of your life, but also what it's called, the word, and that it also comes with symptoms and a transition, just to set expectations again. And to your point from the beginning, put a positive frame around this.
Yes.
And hopefully then that will become the generation that when they reach perimenopause, it is normalized that women of our age are having these symptoms. Because I think we look at kids who are in puberty, boys and girls, and see the mood swings and the acne and whatever else and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. They have hormonal fluctuations. Or we see a pregnant woman who has wild cravings or mood swings or whatever, and we say that makes sense. But we look at a perimenopausal woman and we don't say that makes sense.
Exactly.
We say, what's wrong with you? Buck up, get to work. No, like we need to be looking at that same group of people and giving them the same grace that we're giving pregnant women and adolescent children. Thank you very much. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yes, I just got chills. Yes. And during my workshops, when I tell the girls, they're like, oh, that explains why my mom is rage vacuuming, you know?
Like, rage vacuuming. I love that, Mom. Can she come over?
That's me. My husband, like, I try to like yell things at him and he's like, I can't hear you because of the vacuum. And I'm like,
oh, like, trust me, this is the best outlet for my rage.
But the girls are
hilarious.
just like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I say, yes, you can support each other. We even talk about, ways that they can support their moms during this. And then
that's so
also,
sweet.
this is another powerful piece, but I tell them that I'm running out of eggs and I miss my cycle being regular. And so they can then come into it with an appreciation of all the things that their hormones are doing in their bodies that, I'm now supplementing hormones.
So to that point, are you telling them like all the other things that estrogen does besides help with ovulation and reproductive cycles?
Not all the things, because again, they have a short attention span, but when I introduce hormones, like the first mini lesson on my slides, I tell them about all the things hormones do. So they tell us when we're sleepy, they tell us when we're hungry, and they tell our bodies to grow. And then I tell them, you wouldn't want your body to freeze as a toddler, right? They're excited that their bodies are growing. And so just the definition of hormones is not like the one that if we got a puberty class, it was usually a negative thing, like, oh, you're hormonal. And I want to reframe all the things to really understand, again, getting to that attitude of gratitude that our bodies are healthy because we have these hormones.
Bless you and bless the work that you're doing. I can't wait to send my daughter to you and come myself do the mother-daughter one. This is going to be great.
Awesome.
All right, let's wrap up. Where can everyone find you, find your workshops, get your books, and just follow along for advice for how to talk to our daughters about
Yes.
this?
So my website is girlpowerscience.com. And I'm on Instagram at Girl Power Science. And when you hop on the website, join our mailing list. I send out my newsletters on the new moon and the full moon every month.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Konika. I really enjoyed this conversation with you today.
Thanks for having me. So fun.